Hi, I'm Dr. David Ajibade, and welcome to Your Health in Your Hands. This is the week of the World Sickle Cell Day, which is June 19th, celebrated June 19th every year, and it's almost upon us. So we want to take some time to really talk about sickle cell disease. We're going to have some guests. We're going to have a guest, and then we're going to show you some clips from some of the people we've worked with over the past few years, who basically just to buttress what we believe are some of the things that you should know and do if you are suffering from sickle cell disorder or you have a child or loved one who is suffering from the disorder. Now, the statistics are grim and quite alarming. 40 million people have the sickle cell trait. 2 to 4 million people are suffering from sickle cell disease. Many, if not most of them, are living in remote rural areas, so they don't have access to good healthcare. 10% of all children with sickle cell disease will suffer a stroke. In fact, greater than 10%. And the ages are between 2 and 16 years, where it's mostly marked. That's when it happens the most. So it's a big problem. And we also know that 50% of male sufferers with sickle cell disease, or male warriors, will, if they survive to adulthood, they will be infertile. In other words, they won't be able to have children. So we're dealing with a condition that, in my opinion, needs a lot more attention being thrown upon it. But the worst statistic, the worst by far, in my opinion, is the fact that 50 to 70% of all children born with sickle cell disease disorder will not reach their 5th birthday, according to the World Health Organization. Now think about that, 50%. We know that over 150,000 babies are born every year with sickle cell disease. 50% of that, 70% of that will probably be getting close to 100,000 who just die just like that because of the disorder. Those who survive doesn't mean that they're all hale and hearty. Many, from what we've seen at our foundation, working with kids both here in Abuja and in Lagos and other parts of the country, what we've seen is that even those who survive, they survive is only just. They have all kinds of issues, from brain challenges to sight problems to constant nagging pain to fatigue, inability to go to school. They have some of them have kidney problems, many of them have chest problems. We're dealing with a condition that basically ravages the body and brain of the sufferer. And I feel that, yes, we are doing a lot, and there's been a lot of research, but this is the 21st century. And I feel that at this day and age, I think we should be doing a lot better, especially for these people. With all due respect to our guys at the top who are in the field of hematology, I think we can do a lot more. And I think that comes from really empowering, or it should come from empowering patients as well as doctors to know how best to live with the condition. So we're going to be talking about a few things. We'll draw some things on the board, and then our guest also will come in. So I'm going to go to the board and draw a few things. All right, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview. This is not by any stretch a medical presentation, so please don't attack me. Anyway, it's just about the red blood cell. What happens, because it all comes down to the red blood cell when it comes to sickle cell disease. Basically, it is the bone. The red blood cells are created in the bone marrow. Now, when they come out, when the red blood cell is created, it basically looks like any other red blood cell. So, but it has the sickle cell gene on it, and again, I'm not going to explain exactly what that happens, but it looks like a normal red blood cell. The only problem is it's weak in some areas. In other words, under certain conditions, and there are about 4 or 5, One of them is lower oxygen tension. Others are dehydration, not enough fluid. Maybe there's an infection. Maybe it's a more acidic environment. It begins to sickle. It begins to lose its nice rubbery shape, a nice bouncy shape, because you need that rubbery shape for it to be able to move through in and out of blood vessels and through smaller and smaller blood vessels. But it loses that ability and becomes hardened, dehydrated and hardened, and looks like a sickle, hence the name sickle cell disease. Once that happens, and it depends on the child, and there are several factors involved, once that happens, there are two things that can happen. It either breaks up and disintegrates in a process called hemolysis, which means breakup of the red blood cell, and then of course that spills out the contents of the red blood cell into the bloodstream, which can cause some major problems. It can either do that, or the sickled shape, hardened shape, begins to block the blood vessel. So this is an artery or vein or whatever it is. So the blood is going through, and the sickled shape cells will now block the smaller blood vessels. And anything after that means that the heart, the lungs, they're not getting enough oxygen, and then they begin to cry for help. Many times that cry is in the form of pain signals, and that's why you have this, what are known as bone pain crises, and crises in the stomach and the gut and other parts of the body, even the chest as well. And then or in some cases it can even affect the heart and blood vessels. So that is what happens. There's either a blockage or there's a spilling of the contents into the bloodstream. And that, my friends, is the root cause of all the problems that you see in sickle cell disease. But it is not just about the red blood cell, which I'll explain later. It's really about the human body and how the body responds and reacts to this problem. So having said that, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to introduce our guest onto the show. So we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. With me in the studio today is Mrs. Divan Mom.
Hi.
And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doc.
In fact, we've been talking all morning long, so it's like we're actually going to have to say a lot of the things that we talked about before. But Divan is a career journalist who has lived with sickle cell disorder, for how many years now?
I'm in my mid-40s.
In your mid-40s. So you know the ins and outs, and basically you have a lot of wisdom to share with us, don't you?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, cool. Now you've told me that you're the only child of your parents.
Of my mom.
Of your mom, got it. And so how was it? Because way back then, not much was really known about sickle cell disease, right?
Yeah. It was a bit ironic because my mother was a nurse, London trained and everything, and I was perfectly healthy from birth till about my third or fourth year.
Okay.
Then suddenly started getting very sick. And nobody could figure it out at first because my earlier years were very, very good. I was perfectly healthy. In fact, I was a bit on the heavy side for a baby, and everything.
So let me just jump in there. In some cases, people begin to experience symptoms right from 6 months.
That's what I've heard.
In fact, I know a couple, they lost their child at 7 months because of the crises, and the hospital couldn't figure out why. They didn't suspect sickle cell disease until she went to find out, and by that time, the child had already suffered too many crises.
Wow, that's awful.
Yes, it is. It was tragic. It was very, very...
That's awful, because I've heard that usually there's this hemoglobin F that protects infants.
Yes.
So they're ordinarily very healthy.
Until 6 months.
For the first 6 months at least. In my case, I was pretty healthy till about the age of 4. Then I suddenly started getting sick, and after a couple of years, it was determined that it was I was genotype SS.
So it wasn't tested at birth at all?
No.
Which is one thing that I think the government is working on to make sure it mandates some of those tests.
I think it would be very important.
Yes, definitely. As well as testing before marriage and all that.
Of course.
Yes. So, what were the symptoms you were experiencing when you started feeling that there was something wrong?
Well, general, feeling of malaise, and then accompanied with tons of nosebleeds. as a child.
Nosebleeds?
Yes. I'd have a lot of nosebleeds for absolutely nothing. And well, I'd get sick, become very weak, go to hospital, and there'd be need for blood transfusions and things like that. So the first 12 to 13 years of my life, it was mostly anemia. I was very anemic. I was so anemic I thought it was normal, because I grew up in an era where children were seen and not heard. So with all the questions running around in my mind, I couldn't really ask. And being a somewhat, I think I would say, a pretty intelligent child, I came to the conclusion that, well, cars run out of fuel, the gas in the kitchen runs out and you refill it and all that. So as a human being, as you're growing, you're going to run out of blood and you're going to need a refill. And that was how I explained it to myself. And I thought every child
had a top-up, had it?
Yeah, I thought everybody would get, had to go to hospital every now and then and get a top-up. Because nobody was explaining anything to me, and I was never the only person in the hospital ward. So I figured, okay, every now and then you run out of blood and they top it up for you, and that was it. So it came as a rude shock. When I asked my friend, I will never forget, she was sick and had been kept home from school, and I asked her when last she was giving blood, and she looked at me like I was losing my mind. And I think we were about 10 at the time. So I said, no, if they've not given you blood, that means like you'll soon die or something, so you need to go and tell your parents to take you to. And she told me there was something wrong with me. I said, no, I get blood like every 3-4 times a year, and if they've not given you blood even once, there's a problem. You need to go to hospital and have some blood. So for me, up to the age of 13, that was what it was about, anemia, and then subsequently it became the bone pain crisis.
And that's very interesting, because most times a child either has one, or an adult either has one or the other. We don't have this kind of transition. And when you first told me about it, I was like, that seems very, very strange.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a family of 4 that I always point to. I mean, the first 2 are boys, the last 2 are twin girls, identical twin girls. The first boy is always having a hemolytic crisis.
Wait, are they all genotype SS?
All genotype SS.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
The story. So the first one had hemolytic crisis. He never had bone pains, never anything. He's walking around and he just feels faint, and then next thing they find out his blood is short, and they have to top up. And he's had a few strokes from the condition. The others are basically bone pain crisis. And because the twins, they have crisis at the same time, and it's an interesting thing. But thankfully, we're able to help in their case as well. But like I said, yours is an interesting case where you transition from hemolytic crisis to bone pain crisis.
Yeah.
So which one was worse? The hemolytic crisis, the fainting. Did you faint at all?
No,
strokes
never had fainting spells, no strokes, nothing.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting how, you're playing and you're active and everything in the afternoon, then all of a sudden in the middle of the night you're really, really ill, and then you go to hospital and the next thing they're running all over the place looking for somebody who is compatible with you and all this. Because for some reason my mother never quite liked using the blood that was already in the blood bank. And being somebody who was in the system, I don't know why. So it was always like, and this was before GSM days, so it was always about running all over the place looking for people of this blood group and that, and to come and give blood and so on and so forth.
Right.
So that was pretty embarrassing. At least I can have my bone pain crisis quietly. So, but in terms of the toll it takes on the body, I would rather have, if it's a pick, I'd rather go back to just being anemic.
Really?
Yeah, because the pain when it hits I can't describe it without sounding as if I'm exaggerating.
Please try.
Awful. It's awful. You feel like every bone in your body is broken. I don't know how to even your skull, every single bone, and sometimes it's everything. Sometimes it just concentrates in one limb. And there's no painkiller will work, no amount of should I call it water transfusion now or what? No amount of that works. The pain has to ride itself out before giving you. Sometimes it's your chest. You feel like somebody is sitting on your chest. So I don't know. I would rather not have any of the two, seriously.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And it's important you're describing this because, I mean, we've had case after case after case of people who would go to the hospital and they think they're exaggerating.
Oh, no.
The healthcare professionals say that they're exaggerating. They'll just sit down there where we'll get you and we'll get to you. And I mean, I hate to say this on national television, but it seems like it's still going on up till now. So I think there needs to be a lot more education. And
it's really painful. And what's I think more frightening is sometimes you find yourself with a health professional who has never handled somebody with your situation.
Yes.
And you find them doing things that you feel are not right because of your experience with people who have handled you better.
Right.
And you're torn between trying to talk to a health professional, how they will feel about it, and just being selfish and worrying about yourself. So it becomes an issue.
Right.
Like in my own case, for instance, I know that if I'm having a really bad crisis, what eases my pain much faster is getting the water in.
Okay, so having fluids.
Yeah, having the fluids.
Okay.
Then the painkillers will work.
I see.
And I don't always like going straight for the most potent painkiller.
Okay.
I like to graduate it, let's get there if the pain isn't easing up. But 9 out of 10 times you go to hospital and they want to hit you with
the strongest one.
The strongest morphine. They want to, and I'm like,
yeah.
No.
Yeah, and that kind of creates a problem too with addiction and all those things that people are concerned about. But we've just been given a signal. We have to take a break.
All right.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back. All right, we're talking about the experience of living with sickle cell disease in Nigeria, and I'm here with Mrs. Divan Mom, and she's been really painting a very, very graphic picture of what it's like. So yeah, we've talked about the pain crisis and the hemolytic crisis. What I'm also interested in is the not so what's the word now? So these are things, these are crises, and these experiences are things that everybody sees. I mean, it's very obvious.
Yeah.
But I've been seeing, from working with children with sickle cell disease, there are those who, like, there's something going on. It's not like a crisis or anything, but they're just not feeling like normal kids.
Yeah. Essentially, there are times when you can do everything just right and just fall sick. You can avoid malaria, eat right, stay hydrated, not stress yourself in anything, and just get very, very sick.
Yeah.
It's practically unpredictable. And ordinarily, you also find yourself in a situation where there are periods when you just suffer from a constant state of general malaise. You just don't feel well, And for people who have formed the habit of taking malaria medication whenever they feel slightly off, it might not be a very good idea, because there are just those long periods when sometimes it can last weeks, months. You just don't feel tip-top. And I want especially caregivers, parents, teachers, and so on to be able to recognize that when you have a child who is genotype SS and who is ordinarily an active person, suddenly exhibiting periods of laziness, it's not really laziness. If you care to communicate and get to the bottom of it, they're just not feeling well. They're just not feeling right in that time. Right. And if you go to hospital, sometimes nothing really shows up. There's no malaria, there's nothing. So there's a tendency to think the person is pretending, but it's not true. You just don't feel well. I don't know how else to specify.
Yeah, and that could possibly be due to the anemia itself and to the fact that they're not getting enough oxygen.
Possibly.
Not getting enough nutrients.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned something about you not really having a good appetite. You're always eating junk.
Yeah, as a younger child, I lived on junk.
You lived on junk?
I lived on junk.
Okay.
It was bad. And this was not as a result of any irresponsibility on the part of my parents, because we were a very small family. My parents were both working in the civil service. Things were okay. We were neither rich or poor. I'd say we were middle class. So food, good food, was not a problem. It was getting me to eat it. Yeah, so I had a perfectly healthy appetite for everything junk, from chocolate to chin-chin, biscuits, sweets, cake, and all that, but you couldn't get me to sit down to a healthy meal. You literally have to stand over my head with a cane or something.
You think that did it turn you off, or you just
Yes, it turned me off. It turned me off. There's no way beans tastes like cake. It just doesn't, you know. And I grew up with a sweet tooth. I was this kind of child who would wake up first thing in the morning and go and sneak like 5 cubes of sugar into my mouth, or eat the close-up toothpaste, which happened to be very sweet back then. So I had a sweet tooth, which savory food could not compensate for. And I'm sure that didn't help my health.
And in addition to having a sweet tooth, you seem to have a penchant for some other things as well.
Yeah, which were ordinarily non-edible things like sand, dust, chalk, charcoal, powder, the powder you rub on your face. So many things that you ordinarily would not eat were things I would, grab a bite of every now and then. In secondary school, I was famous for eating chalk. I was so well known for eating chalk that a friend of mine started bringing me the native chalk, the one Igbo people, Nsu or something, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it has a slightly salty flavor. That's edible.
I see.
So she started bringing me that to compensate, but it didn't have the same taste as the one you use in the classroom. So that didn't work either.
That is interesting because we had someone else on the show too, and she came and Rabi Meduna, some of you remember, we had a chalkboard at that time, and she just picked the chalk and started chewing the chalk in front of on live TV.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that because my husband would probably fall over dead wherever he is watching. It's not something we've discussed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just because it hasn't come up.
So he's finding about this for the
He'll probably be finding about it for the first time if he watches this show. But if there were a piece of chalk here, I'd probably eat it and nothing would happen.
So you're still dealing with this?
I don't deal with it anymore, but nothing happened before. I'm sure if I do it now, I won't feel anything.
You'll still be okay.
Yeah.
And that's a condition called pica or pica, depending on who you are, or which part of the world you are. And basically it's a tendency to crave unedible foods and just to enjoy the whole experience. They haven't found out exactly what is causing it, but we do know that nutritional deficiencies, especially with zinc, is a factor, probably even vitamin D as well. We do know that there are some brain regions that are affected adversely that makes them want to crave these things because it is not a natural thing, as you know. But thankfully, it is not a dangerous thing, not a fatal or disease-causing condition. And these people tend to self-regulate. After a while, they stop and reduce it. But it's certainly a sign that something wrong is going on. And so one of the first things that we like to do, especially with the foundation, is to give them the right kind of nutrients. So that, and we know that once you start beefing them with the right kind of nutrients, it does help. And that's why you need some kind of supplementation. As a rule, in our next episode, this, by the way, folks, this is a 2-part series. And we'll go on to the next one to really go into some of the things that we can do to improve the quality of life. I like that word, quality of life of people living with sickle cell disease. I mean, you were born in the 20th century. This is the 21st century. There has been so much improvement and advancement and understanding of the brain and the body and how it works, that it would be a shame for a child born at this time with sickle cell disease to live with the same kind of experiences that you had. We should be much, much further ahead. So we will be talking about that in the episodes to come. And we will also show you videos and pictures of some of other people who have decided to take their health into their own hands and apply some of the approaches that we will be talking about in that show as well. So before we end the show today, and thank you so much for coming, let's kind of wrap things up. What are the kind of things? If this was the only episode that people saw, we have about 1 minute left. What would you
I would say if you're living with genotype SS, growing up they used to call it being a sickler. I understand that's not appropriate anymore. So if you're genotype SS, try to live as normally as possible. Try not to allow your entire life and consciousness be subsumed into a feeling of, oh, I can't do this because of this, and the other. The truth is, when you're genotype SS, if you do everything perfectly and don't work at all, you will get sick. So you may as well just get up and work and live as normally as you can without stretching yourself too much.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, there you have it, folks. You've got to take control of your health. It should not be a crutch. And yes, it's tough, but it should not be a crutch. So we will end the show at this point, and please stay tuned. We're going to show another one very soon. And by the way, we'll be doing an outreach in Abuja this Friday. So I will give you information. Free medications, free treatments, free consultations this Friday. So if you're in Abuja, be sure. And Lagos next week, we'll give you the information on our website as well. Cheers, and stay healthy, and we will see you shortly.
Emeka.
Hi. Emma. What are you guys doing here?
We came to call you. It's football time.
No, it's still at home time. Haven't you heard of the lockdown for 2 weeks?
Lockdown? Of course we had, but that doesn't mean we can't play ball.
After all, we're neighbors. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't matter either. Coronavirus is very deadly. And the best way to stay alive is to stay apart and maintain good street hygiene.
Wash your hands regularly and sanitize. Keep a safe distance from everyone. Use a tissue to cover your nose and mouth every time you sneeze and cough. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth before washing your hands, and stay at home till the lockdown is over.
I see. Off I go, my friend. See you after the lockdown.
Don't forget to wash your hands.
We won't.
Staying apart is the best way to stay alive. Keep your children locked down at home.
This message is from the National Film and Video Censors Board.
Slavery is an evil practice abolished all over the world over 200 years ago. But today, human traffickers are selling human beings as slaves in Africa. It is your responsibility to make sure that you and the people you know do not fall into slavery. Don't believe fake promises of jobs abroad.
People went to say Libya, Italy no use you when they carry me on top water. 4 days now they lock me for inside house, no food, no water. I nearly die. Now God, when me heaven and earth.